Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the other finalists of MLS Cup and the winner of the Western Conference this season, and that's for the Vancouver Whitecaps. And while we kind of saw it coming with Inter Miami in terms of their destiny of reaching to MLS Cup, we did not expect this with the Vancouver Whitecaps. If you mentioned any Whitecaps fans in the beginning of the season that they would be at this stage being in MLS Cup and have a chance to win their first ever trophy that is not named the Canadian Championship, nobody would have believed you. Like that would be just a pipe dream. But yet, this season, it's been nothing short of a miraculous season. And it's a season where, for heading into the beginning of the year, there was always a lot of question about Jasper Sorensen, and there was a lot of unknown of whether or not if this, of course, would work out and whether or not he can bring this Vanny Sartini team and make it even better than what Sartini were able to get this team in. And it turns out that that answer is not only an emphatic yes, but they only just went all the way to the CONCACAF Champions Cup final and unfortunately lost that one. But they did win the Canadian Championship again, and now they're find themselves in MLS Cup and a chance to win their first ever MLS Cup and pretty much playing as the David in the David versus Goliath kind of matchup that we might be seeing this year in MLS Cup. Though I say that, but maybe that might be doing a little disservice in terms of what the Whitecaps have done this season. And also, let's also not forget that if you would have told any Whitecaps fan at the beginning of the season that they would get Thomas Muller by the end of the season, nobody would have believed you. That feels like even a bigger pipe dream, and yet somehow in some way they got Thomas Muller. And despite there was question the fact that, well, with him kind of winding down to the twilight of his career, is he going to be like many of these European superstar players that pretty much are cashing out one last paycheck and not really have the big impact as we've seen before? Well, it turns out that that is not the case. I mean, Muller is one of the rare occurrences where an AHL superstar European player comes to the league and actually make the team much better. We have not seen that since the MLS 1.0 era, and you could argue with him being there has instantly made this even a better title contender than what we already know with the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, to begin the season, just like Inter Miami, they have played a lot of games so far this season. Their journey all started back in February 20th, where they played against Saprissa. They lost that game 2-1 to Saprissa. That was a game where they blew a late lead against Prisa. And yeah, to say that Jasper Sorensen tenure with Vancouver hasn't been a great start and kind of got off to a disastrous start is an understatement. This is where there was a lot of question and even some criticism already by the fact that maybe Vancouver did not hire the right man. Well, the very next game, in the first game under Jasper Sorensen in charge of MLS play, they only went to the Portland Timbers and beat them 4-1 in that game. Now, granted, this was kind of the same case as last year where we saw our Vanni Sartini team go to Portland and able to win 5-0 in terms of that match. But the fact that they were able to recover after that 2-1 loss they had against Saprissa, and not to mention to do it on a short rest, that was definitely impressive. But still, we didn't expect what we were about to see of this team become a bit of a joke throughout the rest of the season. In the second leg, they were able to overturn that 2-1 deficit and won 2-0 against Saprissa in a game where they pretty much dominate throughout this whole game. And then they play against the defending champion and hand them a 2-1 loss as well. But heading into the round of 16, I mean, they're playing against Monterrey. I mean, this is Rayados we're talking about. Rayados is pretty much a team that pretty much like their inner city counterpart Tigres has been a giant killer when it comes to MLS team. They have been a pain for a lot of MLS team. A lot of teams haven't been able to solve Rayados. And early on in the first leg, it didn't look good for them. They drew 1-1 in that game. Again, when you face against a Liga MX giant, you have to win that first leg, especially if it's at home. And that was something that not only Vancouver couldn't do, they gave up an away goal. Now they have to go to Mexico and at least get a score draw, get a win, which is something that is probably improbable for a lot of teams. But they got a break though in terms of that second leg, and I'll talk about it in just a second. But before that, they return into league play and continue their dominance in terms of league play. This is when I think as we get into April, this is when I really call this team a wagon because they were an absolute wagon when it comes to league play. This is something we usually don't see with MLS team when it comes to balancing that and also CONCACAF Champions Cup play that they still continue to do well, but that's what Vancouver has done. And what's even more impressive, I even got to talk about how the numerous injuries that they've been battling throughout this season, and yet it's all about that next man up mentality that it seems like this Jasper Sorensen side has been adapt pretty much throughout the season is the reason why they continue to be so good for most of the season, even when they had a bit of an injury crisis. But after that, they play in the second leg, and this is where I talk about they got a little break because Rayados were actually not playing at home for this game against Vancouver. They had to actually go to Torreon and play at Santos Laguna at home because there was a conflict in terms of the stadium that they of course will be playing in the second leg. Now, still, it is Mexico, and still it is tough to do even if it's at a neutral site. But the fact that Vancouver was able to get a score draw, and the fact that they were down 1-0 very early in that game, like 5 minutes into the game, they were down 1-0. It looked like it was the same old with MLS team going down to Mexico to face against a Liga MX opponent. But the fact that they were able to come back just to kind of shows you that maybe something is special brewing with this team. After that, they did win 1-0 on the road against Dallas. They did suffer their first loss of the season against the Chicago Fire. But keep in mind, Chicago was also a team that, just like Vancouver, has had a great start to the season, especially on the road. They were a very good road team, and not to mention Vancouver was kind of rotated a little bit in that game. They had to with the way that the fatigue is maybe starting to catch up to this team. And then they drew 0-0 against Toronto FC, but that was a big part in terms of preparing for the first leg, where they now have to face another Liga MX opponent. They have to face Pumas, a team that has been pretty good at themselves. They got a 1-1 draw in the first leg. Again, same story. They didn't get the result they need at home. They need to get at least a win, and or at least not give it an away goal, because now once again they have to go down to Mexico. And unlike what we said about how Vancouver got a break in terms still playing against Rayados on a neutral ground, they're gonna have to go to Mexico and actually have to play in Pumas home ground. There's no fortune in terms of Vancouver a chance that Pumas decide to move their game to somewhere else. But before that, they got a 2-0 win against the Colorado Rapids, and in this game against Pumas, it was a hard fought game, but Vancouver, they looked like they were down and out. I mean, Pumas was leading late in this game. It looked like the journey was over, and then they score an equalizer goal in the 95th minute. I forgot who exactly scored that equalizer, but man, what an incredible equalizer! And again, this just shows you that these wins that Vancouver has had, it's not by accident. I mean, it feels like something is really brewing special with this team. No MLS team would usually go down to Mexico and continue to create these kind of miracles. I mean, we've seen it before, but this is in a level we did not expect, especially for a team that has a lot of question heading into this season. And then after that, they only returned to league play, and you're thinking, is there going to be a little hangover after that big win that they had against Pumas on the road? Nope, they smacked Austin 5-1 in that game. They did get a 0-0 draw after that, but then in the first leg of the semifinal, now they have to face against Inter Miami. And we talk about them already facing a lot of challenging Liga MX side. I would argue this might be the toughest task because Inter Miami has been kind of the team that everybody said that they were the favorites of winning this CONCACAF Champions Cup, and everything seems like it's lined up for this team to do so. Well, Vancouver basically went into that first leg and did something that they finally should have done, at least against their Liga MX opponent, and they won 2-0 against Inter Miami in front of a sold out crowd at BC Place. Not just any sold out crowd, but 50,000 plus showed up for that game. And while most of them were definitely seeing Messi for the very first time, I'm pretty sure they were not expecting to see their home team Vancouver getting the resort in the first leg. After that, they go on the road and win 3-1 against Minnesota. Again, every time you think that this team is going to have a bit of a hangover after a huge resort, they turn around relatively quickly and get another big win. That's something that, again, we don't usually see a lot of team able to do so. And then they go into the second leg against Inter Miami. And again, it's impressive to win against Inter Miami at home, but now can they do it on the road? And something tells me that, part of me feel like they could do it because, again, this team just feels like a team of destiny right now. These great resort against teams that they have no business in terms of winning is not by accident. And I just had a feeling that they had a chance to pull off the major upset and able to finish the job down in Miami. Well, not only the fact that they were able to pull off the upset, they also won that game too. They won 3-1 against Inter Miami. And again, there will be that discussion as we'll talk about tomorrow when we do that big preview of MLS Cup this year. Whether or not if this is going to be a telling story in terms of this MLS Cup, I actually don't think so. In my opinion, because of the way that the teams back then, at least for Miami, I know most of that team is still relatively the same, but with the way that Miami has kind of got some reinforcement in the summer, and these same reinforcement weren't actually part of that team that lost 3-1 that night against Vancouver in that second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, or even in the first leg. That makes it maybe even a little bit more difficult task for Vancouver to do so. But the story of this season for Vancouver is that no matter what kind of challenging tasks they have, no matter what teams that they're facing that many predicted they have no chance against, they somehow pull off a stunning upset. Then after that, they won 2-1 against RSL because again, this team is not unfazed when it comes to after a big victory. There's no letdown when it comes to this team when they get a big victory. They then get a 2-2 draw against LAFC. Then got a 0-0 draw against Austin. They did drew 2-2 against Valle in the quarterfinal of the first leg, but that was a game. I'm assuming yes, Sorensen pretty much put in his second team because that's usually kind of the case with MLS team when they play in the Canadian Championship, or at least these three Canadian team does so. After that, they won 3-2 on the road against RSL. They got a 0-0 draw against Minnesota, but that's pretty much the preparation in terms of the Cruz Azul game. This was kind of the final boss for them to defeat, and they couldn't do so. They lost 5-0 to that game against Cruz Azul, and that was a game where easily one of the worst, if not the worst game under Jasper Sorensen. It was kind of unfortunate that they went 4-0 down in the first half, and all my talks about how the adversity they have, and they got absolutely crushed in the first round. So, or in the first half, that is. So now with them losing big in that game, and such a shame in terms of them not able to conquer the CONCACAF Champions Cup mountain and join Seattle in terms of that spot. How will they respond coming back? Because you think after such a devastating loss that a team suffer like this, maybe that's when the Cinderella story comes to an end, right? With this team. Nope. Instead, they came back and bounced back by winning 3-0 against the Seattle Sounders. Now they did lose 2-1 the very next week, and then they did lose 5-3 against San Diego in a matchup that was a battle between the top two team in the Western Conference. But again, every time they feel like they face a bit of adversity, they came right back by winning 1-0 on the road against LAFC. And then on the 4th of July, this was also probably one of the worst games under Jasper Sorensen, in a game where again, just it's kind of almost befuddled the fact that the Galaxy somehow in some way found their MLS Cup winning form against the Vancouver Whitecaps and won 3-0 against them. Again, I think that was probably one of the worst games that they have in league play. Now, in the Canadian Championship quarterfinal, they were able to overcome the draw that they suffered in the first leg against Valera and win 2-1 to advance. But then they suffer another 3-0 loss against Colorado. And keep in mind, this is when you kind of started to sense that maybe the fatigue and also the amount of injuries that this team is battle is gonna really is started to really cripple this team. And things kind of did start to slow down for this team after I said throughout the first part of this season they were an absolute wagon. They got a 1-1 draw against San Diego in another matchup between the top two teams, and what turns out to be the preview of the Western Conference final later this year. But then they won 3-0 against Sporting KC before losing 2-1 on the road against the San Jose Earthquakes in a game where they actually were down a man for majority of the game. So you can definitely excuse them for doing so. In the first leg of the semifinal of the Canadian Championship, again, it was another draw that they had against the Canadian Championship side. They really struggle when it comes to first leg, that is in terms of tournament, both in the Canadian Championship and also in the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well. But if there's one thing we know about two-legged affair, it's not about how you perform in the first leg. It's about how you perform in the second leg. And it feels like this season, every time when there's a two-legged affair that Vancouver faced, that second leg they somehow were able to bounce back. They drew 1-1 to Houston before winning 3-2 against St. Louis, and then they probably have the most impressive win that we've seen this season. And if when I do a moving forward series about the Vancouver Whitecaps, I am tempted to put some of the big wins that they had in the CONCACAF Champions Cup as the best win of the season, and I can definitely also put the conference final as the best win of the season. That is, they look so good against San Diego for that conference final, but I argue this was easily their best performance. 7-0 against what would be the Supporter Shield champion. They basically make the Philadelphia Union look like a team from last season. I mean, it was an absolute demolition that, yeah, I knew that this team was going to be good, but I didn't think they would be that good against another their team that ended up winning the Supporter Shield. So that was definitely a shocker. And also that's probably the heaviest loss I've ever seen a team eventually won the Supporter Shield. Like I don't think I've ever seen a Supporter Shield winning team at one point of the season suffer a 7-0 loss. And that thus it's going to be kind of interesting when I talk about the Philadelphia Union, the moving forward series, where the worst loss of the season. I mean, I know it would be tempting in terms of saying the 1-0 loss that they had against NYCFC that eliminated them from the playoffs as the worst loss of the season, but I would say it's got to be that 7-0 beatdown. I mean, when you suffer that much of a beatdown, that's always going to be the worst loss of the season, unless of course you suffer another similar beatdown later in the season. Now in the Canadian Championship second leg, well, they absolutely mowed down Forge in that second leg. They won 4-0 in that second leg. Now in September 20th, they face against Sporting KC again on this time on the road. They won that one. They did get a 1-1 draw against the Portland Timbers before getting a 2-2 draw against the Seattle Sounders in that. But that was a preparation at least for the Canadian Championship final where they face against Vancouver FC. Which, by the way, if I think I saw a tweet other day on Bleacher Report Football. They basically put Inter Miami versus Vancouver FC. Yeah, that whoever is in charge of Bleacher Report football and the admin, yeah, they must be need to know that yeah, they probably shouldn't be tweeting about MLS stuff anymore in my opinion because yeah, Vancouver FC is a complete different team and we saw in this game kind of the two Vancouver team facing off against each other, one from the CPL, one from the MLS, and Vancouver Whitecaps were able to win that one, winning 4-2 in that game against Vancouver FC. I mean, I will also say that if Vancouver FC would have won that one, I mean that would have been crazy to see a team from dead last in the CPL would eventually won the Canadian Championship, and I think that would be the first time we have seen a CPL team win the Canadian Championship. I don't think we have ever seen a CPL team win the Canadian Championship. That is, but it wasn't going to happen. Vancouver Whitecaps were going to win that, and then they follow up by a 4-1 drubbing that they had against the San Jose Earthquakes before going on the road and won 2-1 against Orlando City in a game where they trailed for most of this game, but somehow scored 2 goals to turn the game around. Something that I'm pretty sure Vancouver fans have been getting accustomed to see. They did lose their decision day game against FC Dallas, and that game was a one that cost them home field advantage for the rest of the playoffs. They could have won the West if they would have beat the FC Dallas in that one, but they weren't able to do so. But it didn't matter because in the first round they got their revenge against FC Dallas. They won 3-0 in that game one. That was kind of like not only a revenge game, but that was belt to ass in terms of how that game went to. I mean, that was one of the most dominant performance we have ever seen in the playoffs. Right next to what we saw with Columbus did in Game 2 against Cincinnati, where they held FC Dallas to no shot in the entire game. That is. Game 2 was a little bit more difficult, but they did win in the PK shell. They actually were down 1-0 for most of the game, but they got a late equalizer and then ended up winning in the PK shell to advance in the conference semifinal. Then they face against their ultimate boogeyman, LAFC. This is a team that they've always struggled when it comes to the playoffs, but they defeated the ultimate boogeyman, but not before they actually blew a 2-0 lead in that one. Again, past Vancouver team, this would have been a loss for the Whitecaps against their ultimate boogeyman in the playoffs. But it's just something special about this Whitecaps team from previous team where this team just had that tenacity and that mental fortitude that we have never seen from previous Vancouver Whitecaps team, and they won in the PK shootout. And in the conference final, that was probably one of their more impressive wins of the season as well, winning 3-1 on the road against San Diego. Just absolutely outplay San Diego in every part of aspect in that game, and as a result, they're now in MLS Cup. And now the storyline will definitely be interesting heading into MLS Cup, especially again, it's a rematch of what we saw in the semifinal of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And as I mentioned before, I do think that the Miami team that Vancouver face in April is going to be a much stronger team than what we see it with the Miami team that this Vancouver Whitecaps team is going to have to face. Now, that's not saying that this team has absolutely no shots in terms of winning it. I mean, this MLS Cup final. I mean, we always talk about some MLS Cup that are very fascinating. There's a lot of different storyline. I think last season one of the big storyline in terms of that is, a team that just kind of mowed down their competition throughout the playoffs against a team that pretty much went on an absolute Cinderella run that we have not seen since the Colorado Rapids did back in 2010. But this time, we actually got two teams that really deserve to be here, and two teams that, again, I wouldn't be surprised there could be some firework in this MLS Cup, and I can't wait to talk about it tomorrow in my MLS Cup preview, and then eventually watch the game on Saturday and see who is going to be the champion of the 2025 MLS Cup. I mean, if Vancouver is able to do it, what a story it would have been. And I think Jasper Sorensen, even though this is only his first season in charge of this team, I think he's got to get a statue in front of BC Place, or maybe get a statue in front of their new stadium that they've been planning to do. There's been a talks the fact that they're thinking about building themselves a new stadium and get out of BC Place. I mean, after all, I think it's understandable because obviously they can't build a stadium in front of BC Place since they don't even own that stadium in the first place. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this game would turns out, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow in the MLS Cup preview between two teams that one was kind of expected to make it in the beginning of this season and had that expectation to do so against a team that just completely defy all odds and make it into this stage, despite the fact that they also themselves have a really good team right now. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below what you think of this video talk about the Whitecaps in terms of their road to MLS Cup. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.